Hey, Deserve listeners, The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. Let's watch.
Set, calm down, and then talk about it in an adult way. And then I talk about it with a friend. And so
is this a friend of me?
Yeah.
So what you're saying is your words when you said you didn't mean any of that stuff. So that's
fine.
not
what I'm
but
saying,
don't
Kyle.
say a friend,
Hang on.
because I've been a good friend to you. And any advice I've given you is because I care about you.
Yeah, so I think that's right. I think Kyle could come across pretty strong, particularly to Sutton, which I think deserves to be pushed back on. But Sutton has this way of talking where I think she just takes things, the way she words things. If I was to work with her, which I never would, for various reasons, because it would be a little bit of an ethical weirdness to, anyway, point is that if I were, I would really work with her on the way she words things, because I don't think she actually means it. She's saying, and then I went to a friend, and I think when she's doing that, she actually does consider Kyle to be a friend, or she wants Kyle to be a friend, but she felt as though Kyle wasn't a good friend in that moment. And so it's saying, so I went to a friend, which of course to Kyle, she's like, wait, so I'm a friend, which means I'm not, because that's what that means. I'm not actually a friend. I am a friend in name only, not in substance, which is very hurtful. And then Kyle, says, I've been a good friend to you, and exhibits this kind of hurt and pushing back on that. And I think Sutton, shoots herself in the foot by saying that. I think she could have said something like, and then I came to you and I felt like you weren't very supportive of me. That'd be a more accurate, I think, way of saying it that wouldn't trigger Kyle.
I did say I had a problem with the timeline. I have said more things to her than anyone in that group would ever say, because you're all scared of her.
I think everyone wants to know the answers to the questions that I've been asking. They just won't step up and actually ask the questions directly to Erica. They want me to do it.
I think that that's actually likely. I don't know how desperate they are for Sutton to ask those questions, but I think that in this system, Sutton does play the role of the scapegoat / truth sayer, if you will. It's not necessarily the truth, but Sutton says things that other people are thinking. And this is actually a really common role in families. We use these shows as a jumping off point to think about our own lives so we can have more compassion for self and others. And a very common family system role when the system is experiencing distress, and some family systems experience distress on a high level constantly, a very common role that will emerge is the scapegoat / truth sayer. The scapegoat is a distraction that everyone can kind of blame and say, we're okay, it's this other person that's a problem. Our family is okay if it weren't for that other person, when in reality, there's a lot of problems in the family, maybe even someone else who has a bigger problem that is not very approachable, but it's easier to beat up on the scapegoat. Some of you may have been the scapegoat in your families or in a system you're in right now. This person often will also be the truth sayer because they already are feeling rejected, and they are, when you are elected to a role in a family like a scapegoat, you're not only kind of pushed into the role, but you also volunteer for it. That's how I teach it in my classes. It's a volunteering / election process. It happens at the same time. Like, I'll do it, and then other people are like, do it. And so you, as a scapegoat, will play the role subconsciously. You'll make sure that you're always scapegoated. And I think Sutton really does a good job to make sure she's always scapegoated by this group. And one of the ways you can do that is to tell the truth, is to be a lightning rod for other people's anger. And she seems to do that pretty well as well.
I'm not afraid of Erica. She's given me nothing to be afraid of. You looked very afraid of her last night.
Well, when you get this and told you're going to get...
By the way, that's understandable. Do I think she handled that right? No. But do I think you handled it right? No, I don't. As your friend, it bothered me to see you back down and be weak.
Yeah, this is further this hypothesis I've had that a lot of the fights on the show are at least catalyzed, if not fully caused by Kyle. That it's one thing to say, I understand where you're coming from, and I understand where Erica's coming from, but she's still saying, you need to be honest. Now, is that because Kyle wants... So the way that... How do I explain this? Systems are... Family systems or, relational systems like this is... There are needs that the system has, and it's a collection of the individual needs is one way to think about it. Or the way that needs interact. It's hard to kind of word because systems reality doesn't really lend itself to our linear language, but the system has a need for a lot of things. So one of the needs that it has is cohesion and stability and harmony. And it's given that the system needs a scapegoat, maybe particularly more now than ever because Erica is going through a crisis and other people in the group are freaking out because they're close to her and they're all worried that they're going to be implicated somehow by the scrutiny of society. So everyone's anxiety is going up. So the need for the scapegoat goes up as well. And if that's true, and Kyle is elected to motivate the scapegoat by the group, and she volunteers for it because it somehow fits with her, we tend to be elected and we tend to volunteer for roles that fit with our personality. And Kyle might be elected and will volunteer for the role of I am the scapegoat provoker. And the way that I'm going to do it right now is to pressure Sutton to be quote unquote honest with Erica. I can't believe she's saying this. Like after all that's happened, I think just last night, Kyle is still saying, Sutton, you have to be honest. You have to really tell Erica that you think she's lying. Like, why? One. Two, how does Sutton know anything about Erica's situation? So why would that be necessary?
And as Erica's friend, it bothered me to see her come after you like that and be aggressive.
Okay.
See, I think that the stronger you are, the less that she would have reacted like that.
No, now Kyle knows Erica better than I do, but that was not how I saw it. I saw it that if Sutton had done anything other than leave, Erica would have been continually more aggressive and along those lines. So Kyle's assertion that, Sutton, if you just fight back, then Erica will back down. I don't agree. Now, maybe that's true. So if I'm going to look at in a charitable way, I would say that Kyle believes that Erica needs someone to push back and that will help Erica and the group. Is that what she is doing altruistically? But I don't know. This doesn't feel healthy.
And now,
Not everyone.
You guys have to figure out how you move on, but I don't want this anger misdirected at me.
That's interesting. I don't want this anger misdirected at me. So is that part of Kyle's pattern that I could totally see that she grew up in a family system where there was a lot of conflict, who knows, and her way of evading the conflict or the blame and the tension and the rejection is to provoke fighting between other people because then they will come to her and need her for help. I could see that being a motivation. I don't know though, but it's interesting that she used that phrase. I think this is misdirected anger at me.
To a conversation that I didn't want to have at a dinner table with everybody involved.
The point is we're trying to say, if you say something and you put it out there, you gotta just be honest in the moment. If you guys have a conversation about me that is something like calling me a liar or questions my integrity, please say it to me. I wanna know that. You know what I mean? Is that making sense?
Okay, so perhaps for Kyle and her provocations for conflict between Sutton and Erica and Sutton and other people for that matter, at least we can add this to the factors as to why she would do that she values people being honest and straightforward with each other rather than maybe talking behind their backs. Maybe she has some traumas around that, so she maybe errs too much on the side of telling people your complaints about the other person rather than, maybe this isn't a good time.
Correct.
No one ever takes my side.
No one ever takes her side?
Yeah.
I don't believe it's true that you're an outsider in this group or people don't make an effort. I don't believe that's
I said that's how I feel. If I say I feel like I'm an outsider, that's how I feel.
Right. It's totally fine that that's how she feels about it. She's not being, well, she's being a little accusatory. She's saying, no one ever takes my side. So if I were there, I'd say something like, all right, so I'm getting the impression that everyone that isn't Garcelle isn't consciously, or maybe not even practically, ostracizing Garcelle. I'm also hearing from Garcelle that she doesn't know what's happening, but she feels a little on the outside. She feels like maybe people don't run to her side as quickly as they might run to other people. And she feels bad. She feels rejected. I'm not hearing anyone consciously doing that. So let's release blame from this whole situation. Let's say no one's to blame, but Garcelle's feelings are valid. How can those two things, because we often look for that. It's like, well, if Garcelle feels ostracized, then someone must be to blame. That's not usually the case. Sometimes it is, but it isn't usually the case. Usually it's a product of little, I don't know, moves or patterns, maybe is a better word for it, that happen over time. And you can absolutely get into a pattern where Garcelle just becomes ostracized. Maybe the group thinks that she's very strong and doesn't need support because she exudes a lot of confidence. And so they run to other people faster because they feel these other people are more vulnerable and fragile than she is. Or maybe it's just a combination of things. Who knows? But there are patterns that can happen that can produce a feeling in someone that no one is directly to blame for. That's okay. And then, but we can still look at it and say, well, how can we change it? We all care about Garcelle. What can we do as a group to validate her and, maybe do something to try to change the pattern?
It's just too much back and forth and just nitpicking and the camel with the, what is it? The toe with the camel's back?
There's the straw that breaks the camel's back.
The straw that breaks the camel's back.
The toe that breaks the Is that what she said? Now, it's interesting to think about what Kathy's role is in the group. She is the comedic relief. I think she's the airhead. I don't know if she is an airhead. What is an airhead? Kind of flighty in terms of her thinking, as example by the toe on the camel's back. Is that what she said? We should also maybe make a t-shirt of that. Anyway, no, we shouldn't make a t-shirt. For her, I think also it seems that her role is kind of like the mother, the one who is like, okay, everyone. She doesn't get involved in the fights. I think she might play up her ditziness as a way of diverting attention, diverting energy or conflict or anger. I also think that in this moment she's exhibiting like, everyone, knock it off. We're not doing this anymore. She seems to have an authority. People, I think, even consider her to have that authority. It's interesting.
Saying those things, no one spoke up. It made me feel like I was on an island by myself. Already being the only black person in this group, and it's not about race, but already being the only one here, have you guys ever thought that maybe it's a little odd for me?
So totally. And I just think that there's a misunderstanding. I think that Garcelle is saying, look, I feel a little bit on the outside sometimes. I don't feel like I'm an insider. And I think what the rest of them are hearing is an accusation that they are harming her on purpose. And that's not what she's saying. And that's causing them to be defensive in multiple ways. And then Garcelle feels like she has to give data to back up how she feels. Instead of everyone just being like, I wonder what we're doing here that is creating this feeling for her to feel like an outsider. I don't think that Garcelle feels like a massive outsider. I think she's just saying, sometimes I just feel like when push comes to shove, I get the shove. And I just wanted to tell you, that I want to be a part of the group. I want to feel like I matter. And I think if everyone just said, it certainly wasn't my intention, but I totally value your opinion, and I'm guessing that we're doing something, including me, and I'll try to be different. Nothing's coming to mind, but by all means, let us know. But there's all these like accusations of you're not being honest with us. You need to be more. It's just like, how about just say, it wasn't my intention. I totally understand. I felt that way too sometimes, and I'm guessing we must be doing something, or I must be doing something, and I'll try to change it. That's all you got to say. Just and internalize it and try to change in the future. But you don't have to bend over backwards. Just a little bit of paying attention. I think that's all she's asking. But all this defensiveness just causes her to like, why do I have to continue to justify the fact that I feel like I'm an outsider sometimes?
I have, but I don't verbalize it.
If you don't verbalize it, how am I supposed to know? Just because I'm strong doesn't mean that I don't have feelings and I'm not fragile and I'm not trying to fit in. My whole life, I've had to try to fit in.
Right. I think there's a lot going on here, and I'm glad that she can express this her whole life. So this means a lot of traumas about being ostracized. And she does come across as someone that's very strong, and people will develop that persona as a way of protecting themselves from vulnerability, because they learned when they were vulnerable, they would be made fun of or bullied or rejected or something. And those people, sometimes we might call this avoidant attachment, sometimes other kinds of things, but it'll come across like you got it, you're good, you're independent, you're fine. And it's a protective measure from vulnerability. And they might even do it internally, like they might tell themselves, I'm fine, I'm good. But in reality, they're actually hurting a lot, and they feel alone very often. And they don't feel strong all the time. Strong. It's a misnomer to call it strong, because it's actually strong to be weak. It's strong to be vulnerable. It's strong to have emotions. It's strong to be human. It's strong to be able to admit that. It's not weak, the opposing, but anyway. So she has traumas around that, it sounds like she's talking about. And she's also exhibiting the vulnerability, which I think actually might be contributing to, which is one of my hypotheses as to why the dynamic in the group would be created where she would feel rejected and ostracized. Because when there's a fight between Garcelle and someone else, they'll go to the other person because the other person tends to exhibit more vulnerability and more need, whereas Garcelle seems like she's okay on her own. But of course, she needs support like anyone else.
But you fit in here.
You do fit in. It doesn't always feel like that. I walk in a room all the time, and I always have to prove myself. Have you guys ever walked into a room and felt like you're the only one that's different?
Right. So now she's talking. I didn't show that clip, but she's like, to be black in an all-white room, or and then one other person of color, Crystal, is difficult, and that's what it is. And I think she said that she grew up in an all-white community. She went to an all-white school, and and also being an immigrant. I don't know if she was born in Haiti, I believe, but her parents were, I think, or at least one of her parents were. Anyway, that can also absolutely be a factor in feeling like you're constantly having to prove yourself. And also being actively ostracized by racism or xenophobia or something. So she has traumas around that, which makes total sense. I, as a half Japanese person, grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood in Sammamish, Washington, near Seattle. And I can relate, maybe not as much, because I would sometimes pass for a white person. But when I was younger, I looked more Asian. And then back when I was younger, if you looked even slightly not white, like it was very noted on, if you will, notable by other people. And so, I knew what that felt like. And I feel like for me, there were pros and cons. The con was to feel rejected, which doesn't feel good. The pro, though, was that it made me skeptical of culture, because I would notice, they don't consider me of their culture. And then I started watching their culture, watching white mainstream suburban American culture. And I started to be skeptical of the premises that are baked into that culture. And that led me down roads that got me, I think, to where I am today, where I have just a skepticism, about certain ideas in myself of, here's my knee-jerk reaction, when this happens on the show, I want to say this, but then I'm like, oh, wait, is that my impulse? Is that impulse based on this cultural pocket that I'm in, which may or may not mean it's valid or appropriate or healthy? Or is it rational to have that knee-jerk reaction? Anyway, so she's being vulnerable, and I think that might help. I think that might help people to say, oh, because her role maybe in the group was to be the strong one that was independent, and for her, and for people who feel, so we use this show as a jumping off point. Any of you out there who feel as though you are not part of a group or you're ostracized, a part of it might be that you're putting up a wall. The others are participating in it as well. But one way that you can change that, particularly in the beginning of the formation of group roles, is to be more vulnerable, just be more out there, be more forthcoming about how you're feeling, more about your fragility. People will naturally gravitate towards that because they, one, admire people who can be vulnerable. And there's a subtle difference between vulnerability and annoying people with your vulnerability, being narcissistic about your feelings. But it is something that I work people with, that because there's this idea of like, well, I don't want to burden other people, or I don't want to stick out like a sore thumb. And those kinds of paranoias can actually cause you to look like you're a robot, or that you're not involved, or that you don't have vulnerabilities, or you're the opposite of fragile. You don't have any needs. People want to feel needed. When you are in a group, whether it's a couple or a family or at work, people like to feel needed. It's very important that if you have needs that other people can help you with, that you let other people know and they will take care of you. And that is bonding. As you have needs, someone else steps up to the plate, provides that need. You're like, thank you for helping me. The person who helped you feels better about themselves. It's a win-win for everyone. So sometimes putting up those walls actually will, as a way of not trying to burden other people and out of worries of being rejected, will actually cause rejection.
Yeah. Try it your whole life.
I'm really glad you're saying this.
I am too. I think this is so. Thank you
I
for
really
sharing
am glad
this.
that you're saying this.
Yeah. Thank you, Garcelle, for sharing this.
See, brings a tear to my eye that this is, all the words I haven't shown all the clips, but there's a lot of debate and a lot of arguing and all this kind of stuff. And, nitpicking on different details, like you should talk more, or you should be more. And I was like, I don't think that's what's really happening is this. Is Garcelle feels alone, and she has a lifetime of pain, and she's has hurt, and she's crying, and she's and then people like, it's the pure experience, and there's no debate, and that provokes people's empathy. They step in. Now she feels not ostracized. She feels included. She feels accepted, and people have pure acceptance for her. So it's another lesson learned that people, as a way of trying to avoid vulnerability, maybe as a way of trying to work on conflict, we have this idea, if like we talk and explain and analyze and everything, that's the road forward, when often the road forward is just, what's my core emotion? How do I express it out of my face so other people can step up and take care of me? Problem solved.
I like seeing Garcelle in this moment, even though I feel bad that she experiences that.
You're brave and you're good. And everything's okay.
Because by letting your guard down and being vulnerable, you allow our relationship to go to the next level.
Tonight, I feel like they got to see a little piece of me.
It was a breakthrough.
The hairdo.
That was really honest.
I really feel like me being vulnerable and saying how I feel made them see me differently. And I think it was a breakthrough for all of us.
Yeah, except for Sutton. She seems to be kind of rolling her eyes. We could imagine what Sutton, maybe Sutton, they'll do an interview with Sutton and she'll be like, oh my God, what a drama queen is. But hopefully that's not the case. Oh boy.
You can't not do that. Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't to hurt anybody.
Right.
So that's the hard part.
Tabby, thank you for this trip. I'm the cake on the way!
Well, I can hear them,
I know, they're very loud.
right?
They're very loud humans.
All right. Well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.